and share my screen here. Billy Bozza here, Program Director, NCI SBIR Development. I'm happy to be here today and tell you about the different funding and commercialization resources that are available through the NCI SBIR program, specifically for cancer technologies. Okay, so a little bit about the SBIR and STTR program. It's available through 11 different federal agencies. And as previously introduced, there's 27 different institutes at NIH, and they each have their own SBIR program. Today, I'm speaking to you from NCI, or National Cancer Institute. We have the largest SBIR program. And the previous speaker introduced set-aside numbers. This is a congressionally mandated program. Here's some numbers just for perspective for FY20. So NIH collectively had over $1 billion in federal support for the SBIR program, and the NCI had around $180 million. And as was previously introduced, there's the SBIR program and the smaller sister program, STTR. But just talk about eligibility for the program. You have to be a registered for-profit United States small business. And our definition of small is 500 or fewer employees. And the company has to be majority owned and operated by United States residents. So here's a pie chart just breaking down the different types of technologies in our portfolio. And you can see they're quite broad. So really anything that touches a cancer patient or a cancer provider is something that NCI is most likely to be interested in. And at any given time, we carry just over around 450 applications in our SBIR portfolio. So why should you seek funding? Well, this funding is non-dilutive. We take no stake in your company. You retain all the IP rights. That's the number one reason. Number two is it provides this recognition, verification, and visibility. So once it goes to the NIH peer review process, we found it helps de-risk your technology for outside investors that are also essential in moving your technology forward towards a commercial stage. So here at NCI, it's a 3-phase program. So phase 1, this is proof of concept type studies, where we can provide up to $400,000 for a period of work around 1 year. For phase 2, it's more R&D type activities, where we can provide $2 million in funds for a 2-year period. So we have direct to phase 2 awards. So if you've already done some of this phase 1 work on your own, you can come in and directly apply for a phase 2 application. We also have fast track awards, where companies are kind of ready to move at a quicker pace, and they can apply and receive funding for both phase 1 and phase 2 in a single application. We also have something called the phase 2B bridge award. So this is to help cross the proverbial valley of death. And so here we can provide up to $4 million in funds for a period of work around 2 to 3 years. The caveat with this award is there's an expectation to raise matching funds in a 1-to-1 ratio from outside of the federal government. So each institute has their own statutory budget limits and potentially waiver caps. So here at NCI, we have waiver caps for phase 1 that allow us to fund up to $400,000, and for phase 2 up to $2 million. And these waiver topics are fairly broad. So most of the technologies in our portfolio are covered by the waiver topic. So we recommend when you're ready to apply to reach out to a program director and have this discussion just to confirm. I don't need to spend too much time here, right? The differences between the SBIR and STTR program, the major difference is how much help you need from a partnering research institution, and if they're the primary, the PI primary employment. We get this question a lot regarding success rates. So it is a competitive program. So for phase 1, we typically see success rates that hover around 10%. But for phase 2, typically the technology is a little bit more advanced, and those tend to score a little bit better. So we see success rates around 30% for phase 2 awards. We recently did an economic impact study to evaluate the success of the SBIR program. So in our test cohort, we had 690 phase 2 SBIR or STTR awards. So these awards were made over a decade period of time. They included over 400 companies and over $787 million in funding. And the results were really impressive. So the technologies that were commercialized through these efforts resulted in $9.1 billion in total sales to date, and also $8.1 billion in labor income, as a result of jobs generated through commercialization of these technologies. Okay, I'd like to spend a little time and highlight the specific funding opportunities we have here at NCI. Before I do that, there's two major mechanisms that we fund through grants and contracts. So the majority of our portfolio is funded through grants, specifically through the omnibus, but we also do have contract mechanisms. I'll just highlight two quick major differences between the two. So for grants, they're primarily investigator defined. So the investigators come up with the problem, the significant clinical unmet need, and they propose how to solve it. As with contracts, NIH and in this case NCI come up with a specific problem and an existing clinical unmet need that we think needs to be solved, and then we allow people to apply and try to solve this problem. And also the receipt dates for the grants, specifically for the omnibus, we have 3 standard receipt dates throughout the year. And with contracts, we have a single once per year, usually in October. This table again is just highlighting the specific funding opportunities. So we can see the omnibus, which we mentioned already. This is our largest percentage of our portfolio. We do have a few targeted grant solicitations that are listed and shaded in white underneath. We mentioned underneath that in gray the contract solicitations. Then we have 3 other different awards, which I'm going to spend a little time on each: small business transition grant, the concept award, and the phase 2B bridge award. In addition to the parent awards, which I just highlighted on the previous page, we have supplemental funding opportunities, awards to add on to an existing parent award. There's 4 of these. I'll highlight each one. The admin supplement. So this is when there's a problem to an existing parent phase 1 or phase 2 award. There's an unforeseen issue and not all of the work was able to be completed. Depending on the circumstance, we're able to provide additional fundings to help achieve those milestones. The second is called a NOSI, Notice of Special Award. So this is when things are going good. All of the aims are achieved in the parent award, and now you're at a point where you have an additional critical milestone that's still within scope of the parent award, but would really make, this is for phase 1s, I should mention, that would make your phase 1 very competitive when you go ahead and you're ready to apply for a phase 2. We also have a diversity supplement. So this is funds we can provide to the small business concerns when they're able to hire and bring on people that are historically underrepresented in health-related research. So here we have the CRP, or the Commercialization Readiness Pilot Program. So this is funding that could be added on to an active or completed phase 2 award, and it's really for non-R&D type activities. So if you need some help understanding your IP strategy or communications with regulatory experts, you can use this non-R&D funding to accomplish this. Next, I want to mention the phase 2B bridge award. I already mentioned it, but just highlight it a bit. Again, this is to help cross the proverbial valley of death. So here we can provide up to $4 million in funding for a period of work of 2 to 3 years. And again, there's the expectation to raise matching 1-to-1 funds from outside of the federal government. And this slide, it sounds a bit daunting. So this slide is to show you that it's doable. So these are some numbers we put together from 2017. Right, so here we funded $51 million through the bridge award, and companies that were funded were able to raise $220 million in third-party funds secured outside of the federal government. So it's really a 4-to-1 ratio in this case. And the funding can come really from anywhere. Venture capitalists, angel funds, strategic partners are typical sources for this. Now I want to talk about the SPTG, the Small Business Transition Grant. So we talked about fast tracks, right? So this is a single application with a phase 1 and phase 2 component. The difference for this funding opportunity is the phase 1 is an STTR and the phase 2 is an SBIR. And so this funding opportunity is really, focused and targeted towards PI, principal investigators that are postdocs. So what we found is it's fairly difficult for a postdoc to move from an academic setting into an entrepreneurial environment directly from the university. So this mechanism is to try to help facilitate that a bit. And so the idea is to move not only the technology, but the principal investigator from the university and the STTR to the small business concern in phase 2. And how it accomplishes that, it has a very rigorous mentoring plan. So there's a technical mentor and a business mentor. And there's also this component of I-Corps being required. So I'll have a slide describing I-Corps, but It's pretty much an entrepreneurial development program that helps companies refine their value proposition. And the last funding opportunity I wanted to mention is the Concept Award. So this is a contract mechanism where we can provide $300,000 for a period of work around 1 year. And so the features of this funding mechanism is there's a very high bar on innovation. So these are, we're looking to fund high risk, high reward technologies that can be very disruptive in the space of rare and pediatric cancers. And the goal of this is to really help de-risk certain technologies that are at a very early stage and then make them competitive when they're ready for phase 1 or potentially a phase 2. Okay, so once a funding opportunity is identified, how should you get started? There's a lot of tools that are available online to help you. There's the SF-424. This is a large PDF document that has all of the information necessary to help you with applying to the program. The NIH Project Reporter has already been introduced to you, but it's a great source for finding out what NIH has previously funded, and you can filter it by institute and also by SBIR projects. You can also look at sample applications that have been previously funded and successful. We have some available from NIAID and also from NCI. And the biggest feature is, and the biggest point that I want to highlight today is to reach out to your program directors. So you can go to our office webpage and you can find a list of all of our program directors with their specific expertise, and you can find one that matches up well with your technology. Alternatively, you can email our office box. There's a slide at the end with that address, and they can match you up based on your technology with an appropriate program. There's something called the Applicant Assistance Program. So here NIH works together with Eva Garland Consulting. It's a coaching tool, and this is eligible if you have never received a phase 1 award before. And so they'll help give you some really good tips and tools to help build a successful application. Okay, now that we've gone over the funding opportunities, I want to highlight some additional resources that we have here available at NCI SBIR. So before I go into, I want to mention that here at NCI we have a centralized core. So that means all of our program directors are devoted to the SBIR program. So that gives us a lot of flexibility in things we're able to do. So as I mentioned, we have central oversight of over 450 different applications at any given time. We provide guidance. So you can reach out to program directors with a specific aims page, and we'll give you targeted product specific feedback. I'll go over what a specific aims page is. Essentially, it's just one page. It's a part of your application, but it's a critical page that should really encompass the total application. We perform outreach, such as conferences and workshops such as today. Of course, we provide funding. And in addition to that, we're going to highlight a couple of resources that we have available, and they're all focused towards networking and training, all to kind of drive the commercialization of your technology so it can get to an actual commercial stage. So here's a slide depicting all of the different resources. And again, I just want to highlight, we've really found that these resources are just as critical as the actual funding support that we're able to provide. So we previously mentioned the I-Corps program. So this is an entrepreneurial development program. And its major purpose really is to help a company refine their value proposition. And so how it does that is it has forced 100 interviews that take place in an 8-week period of time with stakeholders. So it really provides this experiential learning. Next, I'd like to highlight the Investor Initiatives program. So here, applicants will apply, right? They'll put together an application, and I should say awardees will apply, and that'll be reviewed by our kind of network of people from pharma and venture capital, and they'll review the applications and then provide some constructive feedback. And certain companies will be selected, and then we'll fund them to go out and pitch, and we'll also match them with appropriate, stage-appropriate technology events. And we'll also provide mentoring and pitch coaching to help them be successful in this endeavor. So here's a slide highlighting some of the success stories that have come out of this. And I can highlight one. On Target is a recent company that they just received BLA approval, the biologic license application approval for their therapeutic last, I believe, March. And so they were funded through the SBIR program. They went through this investor initiatives, and really critical in them receiving additional funding to help drive and continue their product, their technology, and now they're at a stage where they have a commercial product. We also have a program called the Executive Roundtable. So this is where we put together CEOs and other C-level executives from appropriate awardees in our portfolio. And the goal is to really provide this mentoring, troubleshooting, discussion of common goals or aims. And these people meet for 2 to 3 hours every 1 to 2 months. And this has been an ongoing program for some time. Another great program is called CARE. It stands for Connecting Awardees with Regulatory Experts. So this program allows SBIR awardees to get some preliminary interaction with FDA regulators. So this is at a very early stage. So we're talking, before even a pre-IND meeting. And actually in the program, you can write out questions and get written responses from FDA regulators. Another program I'd like to mention is Peer Learning and Networking, or PLAN. It's a webinar series. And the goal of this is for SBIR applicants and awardees to get targeted advice and information from their peers that have already gone through the program and have been really successful. The topics of this are fairly broad. It ranges from anything to help a company become successful in applying to the SBIR program to different ways that they can advance their technology towards a commercial stage. Another resource is the TRECS workshop. TRECS stands for Translational Resources to Enhance Commercialization Success. So here we kind of have speakers that come from all over FDA, CMS, NSF, pharma, medtech, venture capitals, and they speak on different sources of funding and also resources and collaborative programs at NIH. And the big ticket item for this resource is we perform and match up over 300 one-on-one meetings with the audience, with either the speakers that present in the workshop or NCI SBIR program directors. So it allows a lot of targeted one-on-one information. Okay, so now we've gone through the resources. I have a couple tips here once you're ready to the stage to apply that I'd like to just go over. Tip 1 is to start early. So if you wait till a couple of days before your standard receipt date, there's a good chance, or there's a chance anyway, you might not be able to apply in time. Right? There's a lot of things that you need to prepare for. You need to refine your product. You have to put together all of the equipment, facilities, and resources that are going to be necessary to accomplish whatever work you're proposing. You need to assemble a strong scientific team, and you'll need letters of support from collaborators stating what the critical unmet medical need is, or support for your project. And also, not to mention, you have to register, make sure your small business concern is registered, and there's 5 different registration steps that are required. So we talk about refining your product vision. So, how can you do that? You can speak with technical experts, potential customers, investors. You can really kind of have your smaller informal own ICOR, right, to understand your product vision. Also, you're going to need to reach out to people that have had success in grant writing. So this can be current or previous SBIR awardees, or people, academic collaborators that have this grant writing experience. So you should know the application components. Right, so we mentioned the specific aims page. So again, this should be the focal point. This should be the focal point of your application. And so this is the page that you can send out to program directors and get some feedback on. And so the first half is really kind of stating the clinical unmet need, the problem, highlighting the innovation and the significance. And then the second half is really discussing the aims that we're going to propose to actually do the work. And we recommend these have quantitative milestones. Another important section is the research strategy section. So here you'll provide some background information on the problem, and you'll include preliminary data. So technically, preliminary data is not required for a phase 1, but that being said, to be competitive, there should be some form of preliminary data. And also here, those specific aims that you introduce, those quantitative milestones that you introduce on your specific aims page will be elaborated in greater detail. And this will allow the peer review to kind of evaluate and review your approach. And you can also include in this section a project scope, such as a timeline or a Gantt chart. Okay, so other application components. bio sketches for senior and key personnel. This would be a section describing your facilities and equipments that are relevant to the grant. There'll be a whole section devoted to budget. Title and abstract. This is actually very critical. This is how CSR makes a determination on which institute to assign your application to, and also your special emphasis panel that's actually going to perform the peer review. If you have human and animal studies, you'll need to describe that in a specific section. Commercialization plan, this is specific for phase 2 applications. You'll need to have a detailed description on your commercialization plan and letters of support. Tip number 4, understand the peer review process, right? So the application is submitted to NIH, not the institute. That's something that frequently comes up. And so this is the different criteria that are evaluated in the peer review process, right? So investigator, right? Your key personnel, environment where the work is going to be performed and done, the significance of the problem identified, the existing clinical unmet need, approach, how you propose to solve this problem, innovation, how innovative is your technology, and commercialization. So that's all, even at a phase 1, there has to be some kind of understanding of kind of the existing commercial space and if there's a need for a product to be developed in this space. So once your peer review happens, a summary statement will be generated. And sometimes people are unaware who their program director is, so that'll be listed at the top left at program contact. So as soon as your summary statement is generated, you should reach out to your program director and set up a meeting. You'll also receive an impact score. So this is the scoring that determines if you're within pay line and how well your application scored. And at NIH, the lower the score, the better. And so you'll have, depending on your if it's phase 1 or phase 2, you could have 3 or 4 reviewers, and they'll each give specific comments for each evaluation factor, and they'll give a score as well. So things like 1s and 2s are good. I think this is the last tip, tip 5, known common pitfalls. Know your common pitfalls. So reviewers did not think my technology is significant. This is something that unfortunately comes up. And so what happens is you'll have, after your original application, you'll have the chance to resubmit if things don't go so well, and you'll get a 1-page response to reviewer comments. So here you can address these comments, and we recommend you doing that in an evidence-based fashion, citing appropriate literature. If you have additional data, you can also include that in the resubmission. You can also obtain additional letters of support that really highlights the existing problem, the clinical unmet need, and the high significance of it. Sometimes things are mentioned in the application, but reviewers may or may not catch that. So, the strategy here is to include very critical information in a few different places in the application. I tell all of my applicants to include that information also on the specific aims page. I got a low score for investigators, so that there's 2 scenarios here. One, you can expand on the qualification of the existing team members, do a better job describing how they're ideally suited to perform the work that's proposed in your application. Or you can consider whether you need to go out and recruit additional people onto your team to get a breadth of expertise associated with the application. And prepare to, sorry, one more tip, prepare to resubmit. So we mentioned for phase 1, success rates are around 10%. That's for the original application, but they do bump up quite a bit for resubmissions, and really having that 1-page response. And those critiques are really valuable in actually improving the application. And that success criteria on the resubmissions jumps up to around 20 to 30%. I think I can stop here. I can take any questions. I'll just show you here. This is our office level email box, so you can email and reach out to us and set up a time to speak with the program director. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Bozza. I believe there's a couple questions in the chat box for you.
If you can read some of the questions, I can give a shot at answering them.
Sure. One of them says, what is the timing for review and award for contracts application submitted in October 2021?
So typically, we say around 9 months from application to award.
Okay. There's another one, are non-profits eligible for the SBIR?
It has to be a registered for-profit United States small business.
Okay. And then how long do the reviews take for each application?
It depends. So once the meeting is held, you know, we say it can be as fast as, you know, a couple of weeks when we receive a summary statement, but sometimes you know, the general guidance is at least 3 months, maybe budget for that.
Okay, thank you. Another one, there's a couple more coming in. What are the priority programs and innovation fields supported by the NCI?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one?
Sure. What are the priority programs and innovation fields supported by the NCI?
The priority fields. So on our website, we have a number of different, you know, targeted funding opportunities, and sometimes we'll have, you know, for the contracts, the standard receipt dates for that are October, but they come out every year, and there'll be specific, you know, areas of interest that we're really interested in funding and moving the needle a bit. So I'd recommend just checking the website and looking at all of those. There's a bunch.
Okay, and then there's a couple more questions here. We have another minute or two. Any assistant with the filing IP?
That's it. Typically, we don't get too much involved in that. We have the NCI has their own technology transfer program, so you can always reach out to them depending on where the IP is coming from. If it's coming from the federal government or not, but if it's from university, that's something that kind of we leave in between the small business concern and the university.
Okay, and then just one more I think we have time for. Are CROs allowed to be used if you are a startup, or is there an expectation that startups will build out of a lab?
Yeah, you can definitely utilize CROs, right? So that would be a component of the direct award for the small business concern, and just listed as a line item for fee for service. You know, so if a company is completely virtual, there's an expectation that eventually, especially if they're funded through the SBIR award, that they would, you know, generate their own physical lab space as well.
Okay, there's actually just one more, so I think we have a minute for that. What was the success rate of the funding for the SBIR and STTRs last year?
So I don't have the numbers handy for last year, so that slide was kind of a couple of years collectively. And again, so for phase ones, we're talking about a relative success ratio of around 10% on the original submission. And then on the resubmissions, slightly higher, maybe 20–30%. So that's kind of a ballpark range. And if you're having a phase 2 application, we tend to see those, you know, have a slightly higher success ratio than phase ones as well.
Okay, thank you so much.